Hunting was supposed to be about patience. You sit still, control your breathing, let the world settle around you. The trees whisper in the wind, the occasional snap of a branch breaks the silence, and you wait, hours if you have to, for the right moment. I had done it since I was a kid. My dad taught me everything he knew about hunting. How to track, how to move quietly, how to respect the woods. But no one ever taught me what to do when the one hunting isn't an animal. It was November, deep in the woods of northern Wisconsin, and the morning air had that familiar bite of cold. I was 16, old enough to finally go on a proper hunting trip with my dad and his friend, Ray. We were miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by nothing but dense forest and frozen lakes. The kind of place where no one would hear you scream. That morning, my dad and Ray set up a mile from me, further down the ridge. I was given my own tree stand, my rifle, and a walkie-talkie to check in. It was my first time hunting alone. I felt proud, excited. I didn't know that by the end of the day, I would feel pure terror. I had been in my stand for about an hour when I saw movement through the trees. At first, I thought it was a deer, a flash of brown between the branches. I raised my rifle, peering through the scope. That's when I saw him. A man, dressed in a heavy hunting jacket, moving slowly through the trees. At first, I wasn't alarmed. Hunters crossed paths all the time, public land and all. But then I noticed something off. He was aiming his rifle at me. I froze. It was an unspoken rule that you never point a gun at another hunter. You carry it safely, keep the barrel pointed toward the ground, follow every safety rule drilled into your head since you first touched a firearm. But this guy? He had his rifle shouldered. His eye pressed to the scope, and he was staring directly at me. I swallowed hard, gripping my own gun tighter. My hands felt sweaty despite the cold. I lifted my walkie-talkie, careful not to move too much. "Dad," I whispered. "There's someone here." The static crackled. Then my dad's voice came through, calm but alert. "Where?" I tried to keep my breathing steady. "About 100 yards out." I hesitated, unsure of how to say it. "He's aiming at me." Silence. Then, "Stay low. Don't move. We're coming." The man kept watching me through his scope. I felt like a deer caught in someone else's crosshairs. Then, he moved closer. I sucked in a sharp breath. My brain screamed at me to do something, wave, yell, make it clear I wasn't a target. But some deeper, more primal instinct told me to stay still, to let him make the next move. My pulse pounded as he lowered his rifle. For a second, I thought, maybe he just made a mistake. Maybe he didn't realize I was here. Then, he raised it again, and took another step forward. I wanted to run. Every nerve in my body told me to get the hell out of there. But I couldn't, because if I moved, I was giving him a reason to shoot. I forced myself to keep my breathing shallow. I could hear my dad and Ray on the walkie, moving through the woods, but they were still too far. And the man was still coming closer. My vision tunneled, every detail sharpening it. The way his breath fogged in the air. The slow, careful way he stepped over fallen branches. The unnatural stillness of his face. Then, suddenly, a gunshot rang out. I flinched so hard I nearly fell from the stand. But it wasn't aimed at me. It came from somewhere farther away. The man stopped. His head snapped toward the direction of the shot. For a long, tense second, he just stood there. Then, he lowered his rifle completely, turned, and walked away. Just like that. Like nothing had happened. I stayed in my stand, gripping my rifle with white-knuckled hands until my dad and Ray arrived. They found me shaking, barely able to speak. Ray looked around, frowning. Where'd he go? I pointed in the direction the man had left. My dad exchanged a glance with Ray, then turned to me. "You okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't. "Not really." Ray sighed, adjusting his gloves. "I fired that shot." I blinked. "What?" I was on my way up here and saw a guy moving through the woods. Didn't think much of it at first. Then I saw his rifle was up. He paused. So I fired into the air. We never found him. We searched for an hour, calling out, looking for any sign of him. But it was like he had vanished into the trees. There were no vehicles parked nearby. No other hunters reported seeing anyone matching his description. It was like he had been out there alone. Or worse, like he had been out there for me. That was the last time I hunted alone. To this day, I don't know who he was. A lost hunter? A lunatic? Someone who mistook me for a deer twice? Or was he something worse? I try not to think about it too much. But every now and then, when I'm walking through the woods, I get that same feeling. That feeling of being watched. And I remember those cold, expressionless eyes looking at me through the scope. And I wonder, What would have happened if Ray hadn't fired that shot? There's something unsettling about being in the woods at night. Even when you're surrounded by friends, with a rifle slung over your shoulder and a fire crackling at your feet, the darkness between the trees always feels too deep. Like it's watching you back. I had never been afraid of the woods before. I had spent countless hunting trips deep in the wilderness, miles from civilization. But after what happened that night in British Columbia, I don't think I'll ever be comfortable out there again. Because now I know. Sometimes, the woods aren't empty. It was the fourth night of our trip. My friends, Dan, Mike, and I, had been hunting in the mountains of British Columbia, staying in a small, off-grid cabin deep in the woods. It was the kind of place where you could go days without seeing another human being. A hunter's paradise. Or so we thought. That day, the hunt had been slow. We had tracked a few deer but never got a clear shot. By the time we made it back to the cabin, the sun had already dipped below the trees, and a storm was rolling in. Thunder rumbled in the distance as we started a fire, cooking what little meat we had left. "Tomorrow's our last day," Mike said, leaning back in his chair. "We need to make it count." Dan nodded, taking a sip from his flask. "We'll head farther north in the morning. Try to find fresher tracks." I agreed, but my mind was elsewhere. Something felt off. I had noticed it earlier while we were hiking back. The woods had gone silent. No birds. No wind. Just the crunch of our boots and the occasional crack of a branch in the distance. At the time, I told myself it was just the approaching storm. Now, sitting by the fire, I wasn't so sure. The rain started around midnight, drumming against the roof of the cabin, turning the ground into thick mud. We sat inside, listening to the storm, passing a bottle of whiskey between us. Then, at some point, Dan leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "Did you guys hear that?" Mike and I exchanged a glance. "Hear what?" I asked. Dan turned toward the window. "Something outside." I frowned, setting my drink down. The rain was coming down hard, but beneath it, I could hear something else. A faint rustling in the trees. Mike shook his head. "Probably just a deer." Dan didn't look convinced. "Deer don't come this close to firelight." I stood up and grabbed my rifle. "I'll check." I regretted it immediately. I stepped onto the porch, squinting into the dark, rain-soaked trees. The storm had turned the forest into a wall of shadows, the branches swaying violently in the wind. For a few seconds, I saw nothing. Then, as lightning flashed across the sky, I saw something move. A figure, standing just beyond the tree line. My breath caught in my throat. It was tall, thin, barely visible in the darkness. I gripped my rifle tighter, my pulse hammering. "Who's out there?" No answer. Another flash of lightning, and the figure was closer. I took a step back. He was watching me. I turned and walked back inside, locking the door behind me. "There's someone out there," I whispered. Dan and Mike stiffened. "Another hunter?" Mike asked. I shook my head. "I don't know, but he's just standing there." Dan grabbed his rifle, moving to the window. Then, suddenly, the power went out. The cabin plunged into total darkness. For a second, we sat frozen, listening to the storm rage outside. Then, a sound. A soft tap against the window. Mike turned his flashlight toward it. And in that brief glow, we saw him, crouching, just inches from the glass, grinning. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that. He wasn't just standing outside. He was bent down, folded into himself, his long arms pressed against the wall, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. And his smile. It was too wide, too deliberate, like he was enjoying this. "Jesus Christ," Mike breathed. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he darted away. We grabbed our guns. Mike yanked the front door open, shining his flashlight into the woods. Nothing. No movement. No footprints in the mud. Just trees and rain. He was right there, Dan muttered, his knuckles white around his rifle. I swallowed hard, my pulse still racing. "We need to leave. Now." Dan didn't argue. "We wait for first light." Mike nodded. "We keep watching shifts." No one slept that night. By morning, the storm had passed. The sky was gray and heavy, the ground soaked, our nerves frayed from exhaustion. But as we stepped outside to pack up, we saw something. Something that made my stomach drop. In the mud, just outside the window, handprints. Deep, pressed into the earth. Fingers too long, too thin. Like whoever had been out there had been crawling. We packed up in under 10 minutes, threw everything into the truck, and drove straight to town. At a small diner, we told the owner what had happened. She listened, her expression darkening. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "You're not the first." She went on to explain that other hunters had seen him, too. Always near the cabins. Always watching. But no one had ever caught him. And no one knew what he wanted. I haven't been back to those woods since. I don't know if he was just a man. I don't know if he was something else. All I know is that when I close my eyes, I still see that smile. Stretched too wide. Pressed against the glass. And I wonder, how long had he been watching us? And what would have happened if we hadn't locked the door? Some people go into the wilderness to escape. They go for the peace, the quiet, the feeling of being alone in the world. They go for the thrill of self-sufficiency, for the challenge of surviving on their own terms. I used to be one of those people, but after what happened in the Bitterroot Wilderness, I don't think I'll ever be comfortable out there again. Because now I know I wasn't alone, and I never had been. I had been hiking for 2 weeks, deep into the Bitterroot mountain range, following a remote, off-trail path I had mapped out months before. This was the kind of backpacking trip I lived for, completely off the grid, nothing but untouched wilderness for miles in every direction. No people, no roads, no noise except the wind through the trees and the distant calls of birds. I had done these solo trips for years. I knew how to handle myself, but nothing prepared me for what I found out there. Nothing prepared me for them. It happened on the 12th day. I had been following a ridge line, making my way toward a valley with a freshwater stream where I planned to set up camp. The morning was crisp, cold enough that I could see my breath, and the smell of pine filled the air. I should have felt relaxed, but instead, there was a strange heaviness in my chest, like I was being watched. At first, I chalked it up to exhaustion. Spending too much time alone can mess with your head. I told myself I was just overthinking things, that I needed to stop being paranoid. But I should have listened to my instincts, because I wasn't alone. By early afternoon, I reached the stream and stopped to refill my water. The place was perfect, fresh water, plenty of dry ground for my tent, and not a single human footprint in sight. I set my pack down and stretched, listening to the sound of the running water. Then, I felt it. That prickling sensation on the back of my neck. The feeling that I was being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the trees. Nothing. Just the rustling of leaves in the wind. I shook it off. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. After setting up camp, I grabbed my rifle and wandered a short distance into the trees to relieve myself. You never want to do that too close to your water source. Basic wilderness etiquette. I found a good spot, leaned my rifle against a tree, and took a deep breath. Then, I stepped on something soft. My stomach twisted. I looked down. A tarp. A dirty, mud-streaked tarp partially covered by leaves and sticks. My pulse spiked. I crouched down, brushing some of the leaves away. Beneath the tarp, I saw something else. Wood, netting, and canvas. And then it clicked. It wasn't just a tarp. It was a hunting blind, and someone had been using it. I froze. A blind was used to conceal hunters from animals. But this one? It was completely hidden from view. Tucked away from the trail, covered in extra camouflage. I didn't like it. Something about it felt wrong. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing but trees. Still, my gut screamed at me to get out. But before I could move, a sound. Behind me. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. My blood turned to ice. Someone was walking toward me. I spun around, heart pounding. But there was no one there. Just trees. Just silence. I stood there, every muscle in my body tense. Then, I heard it again. A whisper. Low. Too quiet to make out the words. Then, laughter. Soft. Close. Behind me. I turned again. Nothing. But now, the feeling was unbearable. I was being watched. I could feel eyes on me. Somewhere, just beyond the trees. Waiting. I didn't stick around to find out who or what it was. I grabbed my rifle, rushed back to my pack, and started hiking fast. I didn't stop. Not until I was miles away. But the feeling never left me. The whole way back to camp, I kept hearing things. A branch snapping. Leaves rustling. Soft, distant laughter. I told myself it was paranoia. That I was just spooked. But deep down, I knew. I wasn't alone out there. The real horror didn't come until I got back to the trailhead. It was evening by the time I reached my truck. I was exhausted, hungry, still trying to shake off the unease from earlier. As I loaded my gear into the truck, I saw another vehicle parked nearby. A mud-covered pickup. Two men stood next to it, smoking, talking quietly. I wouldn't have thought twice about them until one of them looked up. Our eyes met, and my stomach dropped. It was him, one of the men from the hunting blind. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. And the moment he saw me, his entire expression changed. His eyes narrowed, like he recognized me, too. The other man noticed him staring and turned toward me. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile, not a normal smile. A slow, knowing grin. And then, just loud enough for me to hear. He said, "You never know what can happen in the woods." I didn't answer. I just got in my truck, locked the doors, and drove. Fast. I didn't stop. Not even when I was sure they were following me. Their headlights stayed in my rearview mirror for miles. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they were gone. I haven't been back to Bitterroot since. I don't know what those men were doing out there. I don't know what would have happened if I had stayed near that hunting blind any longer. But I do know one thing. That day, I wasn't the one hunting. I was the prey. Solitude can be peaceful, but sometimes solitude can be a trap. I learned that the hard way. It was supposed to be just a quick stop, a short break to relax my sore muscles after days on the road. The secluded hot springs in Idaho were perfect, hidden, quiet, untouched by tourists. I thought I was alone, but I wasn't, and I barely got away. I had been driving cross-country for days. It was early autumn, and I was making my way through Idaho, heading toward Washington. I loved road trips, but my body was screaming for a break. That's when I saw the sign for the hot springs. I had read about them before. Natural, steaming pools tucked into the wilderness, far from crowded resorts. It sounded perfect. A quiet soak under the trees before hitting the road again. I should have kept driving. The road leading to the springs was long and winding, cutting deep into the forest. There were no signs of life. No other cars, no buildings, just miles of trees stretching in every direction. Eventually, I reached the small gravel lot near the entrance. It was empty. Good. I pulled in, parked my truck, and let Milo, my Labrador, out of the back seat. He stretched, shook off the stiffness of the drive, and immediately perked up, ears forward, sniffing the air. That was the first sign. Milo was usually calm, but something had caught his attention. Something in the trees. I glanced around but saw nothing. "Come on, buddy," I said, grabbing my towel. "Just a quick soak, then we'll head out." Milo hesitated. He didn't want to go, and I should have listened to him. The trail leading to the springs was short, only about a quarter mile, but it was silent. No birds, no rustling in the trees, just the sound of my own footsteps on the dirt path. Milo stayed close to my side, his body tense, his head constantly turning toward the trees. Something felt off, but I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just tired from the drive, that I needed to relax. I should have turned around. The hot spring was beautiful, a deep, clear pool of steaming water, surrounded by smooth rocks and dense pine trees. No fences, no signs, no people, completely secluded. I tossed my towel onto a rock, kicked off my shoes, and waded in. The water was perfect, hot, soothing, exactly what I needed. For the first time all day, I felt at ease. Milo, however, was not. He refused to come near the water. He just stood at the edge of the trees, staring at something I couldn't see. Whining, pacing. I sighed. "Relax, Milo. No one's here." I was wrong. So wrong. I had been in the water for maybe 10 minutes when I heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel. I tensed. Someone had just pulled into the parking lot. A bad feeling washed over me. Then, footsteps. Heavy, slow, coming down the trail. Milo growled. Low, deep, fur bristling. I turned toward the sound, and a man stepped into view. He was big, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing heavy hunting gear despite the heat of the springs. His boots were muddy, his jacket faded, a rifle slung over his shoulder. He stopped at the edge of the pool, looking down at me, not saying a word, just staring. I forced a casual smile. "Hey there." He didn't respond. My pulse spiked. Milo was losing it now, snarling, his body tense as if ready to lunge. But the man just kept staring. Then, two more figures appeared behind him. They weren't as big as him, but they had the same look, dirty, dressed in hunting gear, faces partially obscured by hoods. They didn't speak. They just stood there, watching, blocking the path back to my truck, trapping me. My stomach dropped. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. I forced myself to stay calm. Didn't think anyone else would be out here today. The first man smiled. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't normal. It was the kind of smile that made my blood run cold. Then, he took a step forward. Into the water. I moved instantly. I scrambled out of the pool, barely managing to grab my towel and bag. Milo lunged forward, barking wildly. The man didn't stop. He just kept walking, straight into the water, boots and all. His eyes locked on me. Like he didn't care. Like he was enjoying this. I didn't look back. I ran. The path back to my truck felt miles longer than before. The ground was muddy, my bare feet slipping, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Milo ran beside me, growling, barking, his ears pinned back. Behind me, heavy footsteps. They were following me. I burst into the parking lot and saw my truck up ahead. Still alone. Still the only vehicle. I fumbled for my keys, hands shaking, lungs burning. Then, the sound of tires on gravel. A truck. Their truck. It had been parked down the road, out of sight. Waiting. My blood turned to ice. I barely got the driver's side door open before Milo jumped inside. I slammed it shut, locked it, and jammed the keys into the ignition. The engine roared to life. And that's when I saw them, standing at the edge of the lot, watching, smiling, waiting. I peeled out of there, gravel spraying behind my tires. I didn't stop. Not until I reached a gas station an hour away. I parked under the bright lights, hands still shaking, Milo still growling low in the back seat. That's when I saw them again. Not in person. On the bulletin board near the gas station entrance. A missing persons flyer. A woman. Last seen at a secluded hot spring in Idaho. I don't stop at places like that anymore. Not when I'm alone. Because now I know. Somewhere out there, in the wilderness, there are people waiting, watching, hunting. And next time, someone like me might not be fast enough. Hunting teaches you patience. You learn to sit still for hours, to listen to the wind, to read the forest like a book. You learn how animals move, how the wilderness reacts to their presence, how the birds stop singing when a predator is near. But no one ever tells you what to do when the forest stops reacting to you, or when something else is watching from the trees. It was late October, the height of rutting season, and I was deep in western Montana, hunting elk in Lolo National Forest. This was my family's hunting land, passed down through generations. My grandfather hunted here. My father hunted here. And now it was my turn. For years, I had made the trip alone, camping for a week or more, completely off the grid. I liked it that way, just me, my rifle, and the quiet. But that year, something was different. The forest felt wrong, and I soon realized I wasn't alone. For the first 2 days, I tracked a massive bull elk, easily the biggest I'd ever seen. Its tracks led farther into the mountains than I usually went, but I couldn't resist the challenge. On the third day, I set out before dawn, following a fresh set of tracks. The morning was bitter cold, frost clinging to the ground, my breath curling in the air. But as I walked, I started noticing something strange. The woods were silent, too silent. No birds, no rustling leaves, no distant snaps of branches. The kind of silence that makes your gut tighten. Still, I pressed on, and that's when I found it. A clearing, and in the center, a carcass. At first, I thought it was a deer, but as I stepped closer, my stomach twisted. It was a black bear, or what was left of one. Its body was ripped open, rib cage cracked apart like something had torn into it with bare hands. But the meat was untouched. No scavengers had fed on it. This wasn't a kill for food. It was something else, something violent. And that's when I saw the tracks. They weren't human, and they weren't animal. They were somewhere in between. Long, thin footprints, almost like a person's, but too narrow, the toes ending in sharp points. The steps were deep, pressing hard into the frost-covered earth, as if whatever had made them was heavy. The prints circled the bear's body, and then they stopped. No retreating steps, no trail leading away, like whatever made them had vanished into thin air. I felt exposed standing there. I wasn't used to feeling that way in the wilderness. I was always in control, the hunter, not the hunted. But something was watching me. I could feel it. I turned, scanning the tree line. Nothing. But the feeling didn't go away. I left the clearing immediately, and that's when I noticed it. My tracks were gone. I should have been able to see them. I had walked directly through the frost-covered brush, clear boot prints marking my path. But when I turned around, there was nothing. No sign I had ever been there. No trail leading back. Just untouched forest. Like the woods were swallowing up my presence. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Low, too soft to understand. And then, a snap. Somewhere behind me. I whipped around, heart pounding. But there was no one there. Just trees. Just silence. Then another snap. Closer this time. I gripped my rifle tighter, forcing myself to stay calm. But then, I saw it. A figure. Standing between the trees. Watching me. It wasn't human. It had limbs that were too long, a body too thin, fingers that reached almost to the ground. And its eyes. Wide. Black. Reflecting the light. Like an animal's. For a second, neither of us moved. Then it twitched. And lunged. I ran. Bolted through the trees, rifle bouncing against my back, boots slamming against the dirt. The cabin was still miles away. And it was fast. Too fast. I could hear it behind me, moving through the trees without touching the ground. Branches cracked. Leaves scattered. It was circling me. Pacing. Like it was playing with me. Then, I saw it again. Ahead of me. It was waiting. I swerved off trail, cutting through thick underbrush, lungs burning, vision blurring with panic. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to keep moving. Then, suddenly, the forest opened up. The cabin. My heart leapt. I sprinted up the steps, slamming the door behind me, locking it, pressing my back against the wood. Silence. Then, a knock. It was light. Gentle. Like it was asking to be let in. I gripped my rifle, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Another knock. Then, a whisper. Right against the door. I couldn't understand the words, but I could hear the smile in its voice. A slow, deliberate sound. A mocking sound. Then, it dragged its fingers across the wood. Slow. Scraping. It wasn't leaving. It was waiting. I don't know how long I stood there. An hour? 2. But at some point, the knocking stopped, and the whispering faded. Morning came, and when I finally gathered the courage to open the door, there was nothing there. No footprints. No signs of anything. Just the forest. Silent. Waiting. I left that morning. I never hunted there again. Never told anyone the full story. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm walking outside, I swear I hear it. The whispering. The knocking. The sound of something in the trees. Waiting. For me to come back.